Hey, Clemson family, it's time to dig into the high expectations for the Tigers running back core this season, and we'll preview the somehow always treacherous Syracuse game as well.
This is Daniel Shirley. We'll also break down the all-ACC preseason polls and look at the Tigers in NFL camps as the NFL season is getting closer by the day.
I'm Bill Zimmerman, and welcome to episode 10 of the Reign Supreme Alway podcast. Go ahead and hit that subscribe or follow button like a lot of other folks are doing. We don't want you to miss out as we keep you caught up on Clemson sports. You can find our homepage at clemsonkickoff.com. We're on Twitter at Clemson Kickoff. It's just easier to type than Reign Supreme Alway, isn't it? And we're on Facebook at Reign Supreme Alway. A lot of you are finding us on YouTube where we post our audio, and that's tremendous. Plus, you can find us on all the biggest podcast apps. Daniel, let's get into the ACC beat reporters' preseason polls that have Clemson coming out on top decisively.
I was surprised that it was such a big margin, but I thought NC State would have a lot more votes in this poll.
NC State defeating the Tigers last year, but failing to win the division and therefore out of the overall champion race. But Clemson and NC State combined for 141 out of 164 first place votes. Clemson getting the lion's share of those at 103, or maybe the Tigers' share, we should say. The far distant third place was Miami with 8.
That one doesn't surprise me. I thought Miami would be there in that spot. Yeah, if you listen to Tuesday's episode, you know Bill picked Miami to win the Coastal. I picked North Carolina. I would be in the minority in this poll, but it looks like Clemson and Miami are going to be the picks to be in the championship game in Charlotte.
The Atlantic Division, after Clemson and NC State being 1 and 2, as you would think from that overall conference total, Wake in third, Louisville fourth, Florida State fifth, Boston College sixth, and Syracuse seventh as the Yankees bring up the cellar, don't they?
They do, and it's becoming a kind of a yearly thing with Syracuse at the bottom of this poll. It's Boston College has kind of solidified itself in that sixth spot. Florida State and Louisville kind of fight each other for the spot above them, and then Clemson and NC State and Wake Forest have separated. And look, Wake Forest won the division last year, so we can't overlook the Demon Deacons going into this season.
And none of these teams really should be looked past by Clemson in any given week, because I'll tell you what, when you look at the matchups, even though the reputations might not call for them to be picked to win the division or to finish in the top 2 or 3, they're going to have some improved teams this year on a lot of those rosters.
I believe so. I really do, Bill. I know the ACC gets banged on a lot, and with good reason for a lot of the time. But I think we're looking at an improved conference this year. I really believe that. Again, Clemson, NC State, Wake at the top of the division feels like it, it's not among the best in the country, but it's pretty solid with those three teams. And then those bottom four, it feels like are heading in the right direction. Maybe not Syracuse, but Louisville, Florida State, Boston College feel like they're getting their programs on solid ground. And then you look in the Coastal, there's some good teams in the Coastal. Miami, Pitt, North Carolina. We know Virginia Tech and Virginia have new coaches. But those top three with Miami, Pitt, and North Carolina on the Coastal are pretty solid as well. So it could be a really interesting matchup between those teams on each side going through this season.
Well, Coastal Chaos. We'll also get into the all-ACC teams that were voted on by the same reporters who were at the ACC kickoff media days. One of those players we'll talk about is among the Clemson running backs and probably the best trio of running backs that we have seen in a long time. You and I were talking about that getting ready for the show.
Yeah, we were trying to look back through Clemson's history, at least history while we have been watching Clemson football, and to find a trio like this. And it's hard. I go back to the late 80s, Terrence Flagler and Kenny Flowers. Well, they were a duo. There wasn't a third. And Terry Allen and Wesley McFadden were kind of a duo after that. So there wasn't a trio there. I even went back to Cliff Austin and Chuck McSwain and Kevin Mack were all on the same team, but Kevin was more of a fullback. So it's been a long time since Clemson's had three running backs like this, if it's ever happened. And I can't wait to see these three guys play this season.
The expectations were high during Clemson's playoff run for the earlier trio of Wayne Gallman, who solidified himself as a starter ahead of Tavian Feaster, who didn't quite live up to his recruiting pedigree, and Adam Choice, who ran into some health issues along the way and never also was able to become who we thought he would be. But this trio and Kobe Pace, Will Shipley, and Phil Maffa certainly showed last year that each of them has the ability to be solid, but also to break a big play.
That was a good trio, Bill, but I don't think anything that we've seen that Clemson can touch Will Shipley, Kobe Pace, and Phil Maffa. It feels like any one of these three guys could be the starter. And we've seen each of them get their chance when somebody's been out, somebody has stepped up. And those three, if you look across the country, is there a better trio in the country? I don't know that there is. And that's a really exciting piece of the puzzle for the Clemson offense this season.
I do think that you'll see co-starters named this year. I think more often than not, Kobe Pace, if I remember correctly, was the starter and listed as such. But Shipley showed we could do, despite missing some injury time. And while he was out, Phil Maffa really stepped up and even had a start, I believe, in there.
Seems like it, yeah. And I'll tell you what, Bill, I like the two-back setup with Kobe and Shipley together, or Kobe and Maffa together. I know Clemson hadn't run that very much in recent years as more of a one-back attack, but I like the two backs back there together and kind of the misdirection you can give the defenses when both of those guys are in those spots, or two of those three guys are in those spots. So hopefully we'll see a lot of that this season.
You wonder if they can work on some alignments where someone like Shipley or Maffa is lined up wide, or even Pace maybe sometimes, in order to deceive, like, hey, defense might think this is going to be that two-back set, but then someone breaks out of the backfield and maybe you get a matchup that you can take advantage of somehow, or vice versa. You line those guys up wide and then they come back into the backfield and you can run something out of that two-back set. I'd like to see the two-back set continue this year, but I also wonder if we'll see as much of it if Uiagalelei is healthier with that knee, and if Klubnik is a more capable backup. Maybe Brandon Streeter and Coach Dabo Swinney will decide, hey, you know what? We can run more of our traditional offense. We can run the quarterback more often. That'll create that indecision among defenders in a more traditional way, at least for Clemson's recent years, and run something more similar that Clemson fans are used to.
I think so. And I'll tell you what I would like to see is some variety, right? So let's see a little bit of all of it. And that's what we saw for several years with the offense, was we would see different pieces used. I just mentioned pieces of the puzzle. Well, different pieces fit at different times. And I'd like to see that this season. And maybe we see some two back, maybe we see some one back. Like you said, split one of them out and use them as a receiver, throw the screen to them. We saw that in the bowl game a little bit, where they threw some screens to Shipley and Kobe Pace as well. I remember one specifically to Kobe Pace that was a key play on a scoring drive for Clemson. So these guys are really talented. Let's use them in as many ways as we can.
And it may be overthinking it a little bit. They do say they want to simplify the offense. They don't want to have to install a bunch of stuff that they aren't going to use, but it'll be interesting to see. Maybe what they're trying to do is make room for some of what they gained in that two-back set last year. We also don't want to leave out a couple of key reserves beyond those three. You have Quadzilla, and then you have the legacy in Keith Adams Jr.
Yeah, Ben, my son, who's a student manager for the team, said, Dad, don't forget about Quadzilla when you're talking about the running backs. Dominique Thomas is a really talented young man, tough guy on this team, and I think he brings something to that running back room. So I know we talked about the top three, but there's talent behind them as well, and we'll see when Dominique gets his chances. We'll see what he can get done.
There's a reason that we all know who Darian Rencher is, despite him rarely being in that top three, because Dabo Swinney does like to use depth at running back and try to keep guys fresh, keep guys healthy. So deep group. Are they really going to be counted on to lead this Clemson attack this year?
I believe so, and it makes sense, Bill. That's where you have the fewest question marks, maybe on the entire team. I know the defensive line is deep, and we've talked about that. The safeties are deep. There's really good position groups all around the team, but especially on offense, where are the fewest question marks? It's with this running back group. So I think you should showcase that group as much as possible.
It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I think the rushing attack is going to be rejuvenated this year. It'll rely on the guys up front, as we mentioned in our previous episode, but there's a lot of talent there, and maybe they can make a lot out of a little, even if that offensive line doesn't advance as much as fans would like to see. Let me just give a quick reminder. You can find us on youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff. You can find us at clemsonkickoff.com, where we link to all our podcast sites as well. Let's talk now about Syracuse, because as I mentioned at the top, this game always seems to be tougher than you think. And when you talk about offensive question marks, boy, there were a lot of offensive question marks in facing the Orangemen last year, weren't there?
That was a rough game. Seems like it was a Friday night game, wasn't it, again? And Clemson did not play well offensively in the game. Somehow won the game 17-14. Syracuse had a chance, had the ball at the end, tries the long field goal, missed the long field goal, wasn't even really close. But for some reason, Syracuse has gotten under Clemson's skin the last half decade. And we remember the loss up there on a Friday night with Kelly Bryant at quarterback, and he got injured. Things didn't go well. Even the win during the 2018 championship season where Trevor got hurt and Clemson had to come back and win that game. So it's been tough to beat this Syracuse team for the most part. There's been blowouts here or there, but for the most part, it's been difficult. And why is that? When Syracuse has had a tough run on its own, it hasn't been a very good program during that run, except for a year or two here or there where they've had an okay run. For the most part, this has not been a good program, but they have given Clemson fits when they've played them.
Syracuse went 5-7 last year under head coach Dino Babers and almost made it 6-6 by just narrowly losing to Clemson 17-14. Will Shipley was out that week. It was a Friday night. You're right. Uiagalelei actually had a good completion percentage. He was 21-34, but that totaled just 181 yards. So very strange game, and I don't know if there's something that Syracuse understands in the trenches on how to neutralize that Clemson offensive line and kind of hit at the point of attack to gum things up. I don't know how they do it, but whatever they're doing, it works. Babers has it down pat. He's gone through multiple defensive coordinators and still been effective at, for the most part, year in, year out, containing that Clemson offense. This year it's a Week 8 matchup. Clemson gets them going into the bye week and also at home. And the Syracuse offense will try to pick things up this year, settling mid-year last year on run-first quarterback Garrett Schrader. During this offseason, they added new offensive coordinator Robert Onay. It's their fourth offensive coordinator in 7 years. He comes over from Virginia after Bronco Mendenhall and his staff left the Cavaliers.
Are you surprised Dino's still there? Because I am. I with all the coaching turnover they've had, you just mentioned another offensive coordinator. I'm surprised that he's getting more time because typically when it gets to that point and you have this much turnover, these ADs will say, well, it's probably the head coach and it's time for a change. But they've not made a change yet at Syracuse and Dino's still there. So we'll see how that works out this season.
It'll be interesting to watch. Week 8, again, a home game this year. Hopefully that'll play in Clemson's favor. Let's go ahead now and transition into the all-ACC preseason player selections. There were 6 Tigers chosen on that team. It does start with running back Will Shipley, offensive lineman Jordan McFadden on the offensive side of the ball. On defense, it's predictable. Defensive tackle Brian Brzee, defensive end Miles Murphy, and linebacker Trenton Simpson. The 6th player then comes from special teams, and it's kicker B.T. Potter.
No surprises there. Those are the guys you would think would be on these teams. They are the players who kind of stand out coming back. A little surprised that Andrew Makuba wasn't on the team, but he was just a freshman. So his time will come, probably will come at the end of this year and going into next season because I think he's going to have a big year. But those 6 really make a lot of sense. Getting B.T. Potter back for one more year was huge for this team. You know what you can get from him and you can count on him. And those other 5 are really kind of the faces of the team going into this season.
The defensive line, the defensive front 7 even really is going to define this season, I think, for Clemson. Not alone in that thought. It's a fairly widespread opinion. And when you look at Brian Brzee and Jordan McFadden, you can also add Tyler Davis to those 2 names. And those are the 3 guys on the Outland Award watch list early on, which of course is a national award.
You know, you look at Tyler Davis, what he's done, and Brian Brzee and the injuries that they've had and they've overcome. Can't wait to see Brzee back healthy. Hopefully he's going to be ready for the start of the season, and we'll see what Tyler and Jordan McFadden can do. But they're really good players. They're great leaders, I think, for this team, and they're all going to be huge pieces to the puzzle for Clemson this season.
Brzee, Simpson, and Murphy all on the Nagurski watch list as well. And then Potter is on the Groza watch list for kickers. I know they always talk about none of this is going to define anything as the season goes along, but it's interesting to talk about. It's interesting to see how teams compare. And what we believe they are capable of at the start of the season, then compare that to how things actually play out by mid-year, by the end of the season. But none of this seems unfair out of the box. None of this seems like false hype being built up. These are all talented players. We saw it from each of them last year. Hopefully Brian Brzee will be healthy early enough and play often enough with all that depth at defensive tackle. You may see him play a little less and be really, really effective, but have trouble winning some of these all-conference or national awards by the end of the year through no fault of his own.
Doesn't that say a lot about him, Bill? I mean, he was third team all-ACC last year and didn't play the second half of the season, and he's getting these kinds of awards or recognition, I guess, more than awards, and he hasn't played in about 10 months. So it's really cool to see him get that recognition, and I think he's going to live up to that if he's healthy this season.
You also noted a few things going on for former Tigers making individual names for themselves in the NFL early on as camps get going.
It's fun to see Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne together in Jacksonville. You know, we know Travis got hurt last year, wasn't able to play. Trevor had a rough go of it as a rookie, but that's what happens with rookie quarterbacks, especially when you have the mess that they had as a coaching staff in Jacksonville. And it sounds like they have more of a solid coaching staff this year. Things seem to be falling in place. And one of those coaches on that coaching staff is Brinson Buckner, former Tiger. Bill, he played when you and I were in school, so we got to know him a little bit. He's had a great career as a coach. He was a great player in the NFL, and he's done great things as a coach since he's moved into that profession. It's cool to see him on this coaching staff for his first year in Jacksonville.
Andrew Booth also making a name for himself pretty quickly out of the gate, the rookie from Clemson, now in Minnesota.
Yeah, if you haven't seen the video yet, go check it out on Twitter. Clemson fans, we got to see a lot of that during his time in Clemson and the interceptions against Pittsburgh, the one against Virginia. I remember all the ones that were on all the ESPN Sports Center highlight shows. He had one in practice today with Minnesota, so he's already doing his thing in the NFL, and we're just now getting started with camps.
You can check our feed on Twitter at Clemson Kickoff. We'll get that retweeted for you. Also, we retweet a lot of breaking news as it happens between episodes. We'll react to some things. So another way we can help keep you posted. I know one more thing you wanted to mention, Daniel, and that's Clemson basketball going to make a trip overseas.
Yeah, the basketball team is going to France, and it's going to be, I think it's going to be a good trip for this team, Bill. I know we know about PJ Hall, and we talked about PJ having his surgery, and we talked about that in a couple of episodes, but he's had the surgery. He's starting his rehab. Brad Brownell said PJ is making the trip with the team to France. So I think that's a big piece, and he's not going to play, obviously, but we'll see when he's able to get with the team. This feels like a big trip for this team. The freshmen, Dylan Hunter, Chauncey Gibson, Chauncey Wiggins, RJ Godfrey, and redshirt freshman Josh Beadle, and then the transfer of Brevin Galloway. That's a lot of new faces. And to get to go and play games already in the preseason, and they've had extra practices because they're making this trip, I think it really could help this team. Now, where is the team going to be when the season starts? We'll have to wait and see, but to get this extra time together can't hurt. And all the new faces, and then the other big men, Ian Shefflin and Ben Middlebrooks, are going to have to step up and probably fill PJ's role on this trip. So that can't hurt them as well. So I really believe this is an important trip for this team, and we'll see how it helps them once they get to the season.
Time on the road can give a team time to get to know one another a little better, and of course this will be in the air as well. They leave on August 3rd. According to ABC 13, they'll be back on the 13th. So that'll be interesting to see. And then the season opener, as you mentioned, November 25th. Well, next time we will have a big episode. We are going to get into our overview of the 2022 Clemson quarterbacks. We saved that position for last, going from some of the reserves like transfer Hunter Johnson, who may be more of a coach than a player, but available if needed. Obviously, the freshman Cade Klubnik, and for sure the returning starter DJ Uiagalelei. So there's going to be a lot to talk about there.
There is, and it's going to be a big episode for us because we're going to preview the Notre Dame game, and that might be the toughest game on the Tigers' schedule this season. A lot to get to in our next episode.
And of course, if any news breaks in the next few days, we'll react to that as well and make sure we talk about the context it fits into for Clemson. Well, we hope everyone has enjoyed this. We are glad you found us, Clemson family. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that follow button. We're a free podcast. We just don't want you to miss out anytime we post, and we're going to react to the big news that's happening around Clemson athletics. Our homepage has some great resources. That's clemsonkickoff.com. You'll find all our important links there. And you can follow us on Twitter at Clemson Kickoff. We're going to retweet, like I mentioned. We'll give some quick hit opinions if it comes up in between episodes. And we're on Facebook at Reign Supreme Alway. So until next time, I'm Bill Zimmerman.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Go Tigers.